The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of my garage. 11:30 at night, and I was still under the hood of a 1967 Mustang Fastback, trying to rebuild an engine that some weekend warrior had destroyed with cheap oil and delusions of mechanical competence. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across my workspace. "Eli, we need to talk." I didn't need to look up to know that tone. Vanessa stood in the doorway between the garage and our kitchen, her perfectly manicured silhouette backlit by the warm glow from inside. Even from here, I could see her phone clutched in her hand, like a weapon. "Let me guess," I said, wiping my hands on an already filthy rag. "The caterer can't do gluten-free, dairy-free, taste-free appetizers for Saturday's engagement party? The party's canceled." Her voice was flat, businesslike. The same tone she used when firing social media interns who couldn't tell Instagram from TikTok. I straightened up slowly, feeling my back pop in 3 places. 34 years old and already creaking like the classic cars I restored. "Canceled? We sent invitations 2 weeks ago. Your parents are flying in from Phoenix." "I uninvited everyone." She stepped into the garage, her designer heels clicking against the concrete. Everything about Vanessa was designer these days. The shoes, the handbag, the carefully curated personality she'd built for her 15,000 Instagram followers. "You uninvited your parents?" "Everyone except family." She was texting while talking, her thumbs flying across the screen. "The guest list was all wrong. Too many people who don't fit our brand." Our brand. Christ. When had our relationship become a marketing campaign? "What brand is that exactly?" I asked, though I already knew I'd regret it. "Successful, aspirational, people who matter." She looked up from her phone just long enough to give me that patronizing smile I'd grown to hate. "Half the people you invited work at the hardware store or the diner. It's not the image we want to project." "The image we want to project," I repeated slowly. "To who?" Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. To people who could help our careers, Jordan's bringing some influencers from the city, and Maya knows investors who... Jordan? The name hit me like a cold slap. Who the hell is Jordan? For just a second, Vanessa's composure cracked. Her eyes darted back to her phone, and I caught a glimpse of the screen, a text thread with a contact labeled Jordan, and a string of messages that made my stomach drop. "He's a business contact," she said quickly, but her voice had gone up half an octave. "An entrepreneur. He runs a lifestyle brand." "A lifestyle brand." I nodded, like this made perfect sense. "And he's coming to our engagement party." "It's not our engagement party anymore. It's a networking event, a celebration of new opportunities." I stared at my wife, my fiancée technically, since we'd never gotten around to actually getting married despite living together for 3 years. She was beautiful in that carefully constructed way that required 2 hours of preparation every morning. Blonde highlights that cost more than most people's car payments. Skin that had never seen a day of honest work. She looked like success, if success wore size 0 dresses and had a social media addiction. "New opportunities," I said. "Exactly." She brightened, mistaking my tone for agreement. "People who can help us move up in the world, build something bigger than..." She gestured vaguely at my garage, at the tools and parts and honest work that kept our lights on. "Bigger than what pays for your lifestyle brand wardrobe?" The smile vanished. "Don't be bitter, Eli. It's not attractive. Neither is uninviting my friends without telling me. Your friends don't have anything to offer us. Jax fixes motorcycles. Mrs. Hanley is a retired school secretary. What are they going to do for our future?" I could have pointed out that Jax had been my best friend since high school, that he'd helped me start my restoration business, that Mrs. Hanley had been like a grandmother to both of us. I could have mentioned that these people had been there for us when Vanessa's previous business contacts had flaked out on promises and opportunities. But I'd learned that logic was wasted on someone who measured relationships by follower counts. "Fine," I said instead. "Cancel the party." She blinked, clearly expecting more of a fight. "Fine?" "Fine. I understand completely." And I did understand, more than she realized. "Good." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Eli? Try to shower before bed. You smell like motor oil." I waited until I heard her heels clicking up the stairs to our bedroom before I moved. Then I walked to where she'd been standing and picked up the small object that had fallen from her purse when she'd gestured at my garage. A second phone. A cheap burner with a cracked screen and a handful of contacts. I powered it on. The first message thread was with Jordan, and it sent a chill through me. Photos, explicit texts, and detailed plans for Saturday night that had nothing to do with networking and everything to do with the hotel room Jordan had booked downtown. The second thread was a group chat called Operation Upgrade with Maya, Savannah, and 2 numbers I didn't recognize. The messages went back weeks. Screenshots of my bank statements that Vanessa had photographed. Discussions about exit strategies and maximizing settlement potential. A detailed timeline for transitioning from small-town mechanic's girlfriend to influencer entrepreneur's partner. I scrolled through months of messages, my hands shaking with rage. They'd been planning this for half a year. The engagement party was supposed to be Vanessa's coming-out event, her public debut as someone too good for the man who'd supported her for 3 years while she built her brand. But here's the thing about underestimating people. It only works if they don't find out. I pocketed the phone and walked back to the Mustang, but instead of picking up my wrench, I pulled out my own phone and started making calls. "Jax, it's Eli. I know it's late, but I need a favor. How would you like to help me throw the best damn party this town has ever seen?" By Thursday morning, I'd made 37 phone calls and sent twice as many texts. The party was back on, but with a few modifications. Instead of Eli and Vanessa's engagement celebration, the invitations now read, "Eli's Dodged a Bullet Party," with a subtitle that made me grin every time I saw it, "Celebrating Lucky Escapes and New Beginnings." I'd invited everyone Vanessa had uninvited, plus a few dozen more. Jax was handling the bar setup with his usual enthusiasm for controlled chaos. Mrs. Hanley had volunteered to coordinate the food, which meant half the neighborhood would be contributing their signature dishes. The hotel ballroom was booked and paid for, with Vanessa's credit card, which was still linked to my business account. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. I wasn't breaking any laws, wasn't doing anything that couldn't be explained as a misunderstanding or a change of heart. I was just throwing a party. If people happened to draw their own conclusions about why my engagement celebration had become a freedom festival, well, that was their business. Vanessa had left for her co-working space early Thursday morning, talking excitedly about her big weekend plans with Jordan and the crew. She'd be gone all day Friday too, she'd said, getting ready for their networking event. She had no idea that her networking event had been canceled and replaced with something much more entertaining. "You sure about this, man?" Jax asked, hefting a case of beer into his pickup truck. "Once this goes down, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure." I handed him another case. "She made her choice. Now she gets to live with it." Jax nodded slowly. He was a big guy, 6'4", with arms like tree trunks from years of wrestling motorcycles and their owners. He'd bounced at 3 different bars before opening his own shop, and he had a talent for reading people that had kept both of us out of trouble more times than I could count. "What about Jordan?" he asked. "What about him?" "He's going to show up Saturday night expecting to meet Vanessa. You want me to handle that?" I grinned. "I want you to make him feel very welcome. Give him the full small-town hospitality experience." "I can do that." Jax's smile was not reassuring. "What about the others? Maya and Savannah? Let them come. The more the merrier. I slammed the tailgate shut. Besides, I have a feeling they're going to provide their own entertainment. Friday afternoon, I was putting the finishing touches on a 1969 Camaro when Mrs. Hanley appeared in my garage doorway. She was 73 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and absolutely ruthless when it came to neighborhood gossip. She also had the best surveillance network in 3 counties, consisting entirely of other retired women with too much time and too little patience for nonsense. "Eli, dear," she said, holding a covered casserole dish. "I brought you some lasagna for tomorrow, and I thought you should know that girlfriend of yours has been having some very interesting visitors." "Oh?" "Young man in a Tesla. Comes by every Tuesday and Thursday when you're at work. Stays about 2 hours." She set the lasagna on my workbench with a satisfied thump. "Drives like an idiot. Nearly hit my mailbox last week." "Tesla, huh?" "Vanity plates, says influencer. Missing the E, I assume, because he's missing some brain cells, too." Mrs. Hanley's smile was sweet as poisoned honey. "Anyway, I might have mentioned to a few friends that tomorrow's party should be very educational. Word gets around, you know." "I'm counting on it." Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel electric with possibility. I'd spent the afternoon setting up the hotel ballroom with Jax and a rotating crew of friends who'd been more than happy to help once they understood what was happening. The decorations were perfect, elegant but not pretentious, celebratory but with an edge of something darker. The banner across the main entrance read, "Congratulations, Eli," in gold letters 3 feet tall. Smaller signs throughout the room announced, "Freedom isn't free, but it's worth it," and "Here's to lucky escapes." The bar featured signature cocktails with names like The Close Call and Bullet Dodged. Mrs. Hanley had outdone herself with the food spread, and the DJ, a friend of Jax's who understood the assignment, had prepared a playlist that would keep people entertained and talking. By 7 o'clock, the place was packed. Everyone who'd been uninvited had shown up, plus their friends, plus their friends' friends. The hardware store crew was there, along with the diner staff, the teachers from the local high school, the volunteer firefighters, and what seemed like half the town. These were real people with real jobs and real stories, and they were having a real good time. I was standing near the entrance, greeting guests and accepting congratulations on my narrow escape when Jordan arrived. He was exactly what I'd expected, mid-20s, perfectly styled hair, wearing a white suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He walked in like he owned the place, scanning the room with the kind of casual arrogance that made my teeth itch. "Excuse me," he said, approaching me with a practiced smile. "I'm looking for Vanessa Carver. I'm Jordan Pierce. We have a business meeting." "Jordan!" I stuck out my hand with enthusiasm that made him blink. "I'm Eli. Vanessa's told me so much about you." He shook my hand cautiously. "She has?" "Oh yes. All about your lifestyle brand and your business opportunities." I gestured toward the crowded room. "She's not here yet, but you're welcome to stay and enjoy the party. Can I get you a drink? We have a signature cocktail called The Close Call that I think you'd appreciate." "What kind of party is this exactly?" He was looking around now, taking in the decorations and the decidedly non-influencer crowd. "It's a celebration," I said, "of new beginnings and lucky breaks. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is realizing you're about to make a huge mistake before it's too late." Jordan's smile was starting to look strained. "I'm not sure I understand." "You will." I flagged down Jax, who appeared at my shoulder like a friendly mountain. "Jax, this is Jordan, the one I was telling you about." "Jordan!" Jax's handshake was enthusiastic enough to make Jordan wince. "Great to meet you, buddy. Eli's told us all about you." "He has?" "Oh yeah, we've all been looking forward to meeting Vanessa's business partner." Jax's grin was wide and innocent. "Come on, let me introduce you to some folks. They're going to love your story." I watched Jax lead Jordan toward the bar, where Mrs. Hanley was holding court with a group of women who looked like they'd been sharpening their tongues all week. Jordan was about to get the small-town welcome wagon treatment, whether he wanted it or not. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Running late. Start without me." I typed back, "Already did." The party was hitting its stride when Maya and Savannah arrived at 8:30, dressed for the Instagram event they'd been expecting. Maya wore a silver dress that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and Savannah had gone with something black and clingy that screamed, "Look at me." They paused in the doorway, clearly confused by the crowd and the decorations. I intercepted them before they could retreat. "Maya, Savannah, so glad you could make it." I air-kissed them both, playing the gracious host. "Welcome to my freedom celebration." "Your what?" Savannah's voice was sharp with suspicion. "My freedom celebration. You know, celebrating all the bullets I've dodged lately." I gestured toward the banner. "Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need, even when you don't realize you need it." Maya was scanning the room frantically. "Where's Vanessa? She said this was a networking event." "Oh, she'll be along. In the meantime, you should mingle. Meet some real people for a change." I spotted Coach Miller, my old high school gym teacher who'd become a local cop, and waved him over. "Coach, I want you to meet some friends of Vanessa's. They're very interested in local business opportunities." Coach Miller was 60, built like a fire hydrant, and had exactly zero patience for pretentious nonsense. He looked Maya and Savannah up and down with the expression of a man who'd spent 30 years dealing with teenagers and their drama. "Ladies," he said in his gravelly voice, "you're the ones been helping Vanessa with her business plans?" "We don't know what you're talking about," Maya said quickly. "Sure you do." Coach Miller's smile was not friendly. "Small town, you know. Word gets around, especially when people start taking pictures of bank statements and discussing exit strategies in public places." The color drained from both women's faces. "Now, I'm not saying there's anything illegal about being a terrible person," Coach Miller continued conversationally. "But I am saying that people around here don't much care for folks who use and abuse their friends, especially when those friends are good people like Eli here." I left them to Coach Miller's tender mercies and went to check on Jordan, who was surrounded by a growing crowd near the bar. Mrs. Hanley had him cornered and was regaling him with stories about young people these days and their lack of moral fiber. Jordan looked like a deer caught in headlights, desperately searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "Having fun?" I asked, appearing at his elbow. "Where's Vanessa?" he asked through gritted teeth. "She was supposed to be here an hour ago." "Oh, she'll show up eventually. She always does." I signaled the bartender. "Another close call for my friend here." "I don't want another drink. I want to know what's going on." "What's going on," I said, "is a party. People are having a good time, celebrating life's little victories, like finding out who your real friends are before it's too late." Jordan stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. He was starting to understand that something was very wrong with his carefully laid plans. "You know," he said slowly, "I know lots of things." I pulled out Vanessa's burner phone and set it on the bar between us. "For instance, I know that you've been planning this little business meeting for quite some time. Very thorough planning, very detailed." Jordan went pale. "That's not mine." "Of course it's not. It's Vanessa's. She dropped it the other night when she was explaining to me about networking and new opportunities." I picked up the phone and scrolled through the messages. "Some interesting photos in here, very artistic, and the group chat, Operation Upgrade. That's quite a business plan you all put together. You can't what? Can't read messages on a phone that was left in my house? Can't share information about my own relationship?" I put the phone back in my pocket. "Jordan, buddy, I think you need to understand something. You're not in the city anymore. This is a small town, and we do things differently here." "Are you threatening me?" "Threatening you?" I looked genuinely shocked. Of course not. I'm just explaining the situation. See, around here, when someone tries to screw over a decent person, the community tends to take notice. And when that someone is an outsider who thinks he can waltz in and take advantage of our neighbors, well, let's just say the welcome wagon can turn into something else entirely. As if on cue, Jax appeared on Jordan's other side, still smiling his friendly smile. "Everything okay here?" Jax asked. "Just fine," I said. Jordan was just asking about Vanessa. "Oh, she'll be along," Jax said cheerfully. "Though I hear she might be running into some transportation issues." Jordan's eyes darted between us. "What kind of transportation issues?" "Well," Jax said thoughtfully. "Funny thing about those fancy electric cars. Very sensitive to environmental factors. Temperature changes, moisture, foreign objects in the exhaust system." "What did you do to my car?" "Me? Nothing at all." Jax looked hurt. Though I did notice when I was walking through the parking lot that someone had left some very interesting messages on your windshield. Soap, I think. Very artistic. And someone seems to have let the air out of your tires. Kids these days, you know? No respect for other people's property. Jordan pushed away from the bar, his face flushed with anger and panic. "You can't do this." "Do what?" I asked innocently. "Throw a party? Invite my friends? Celebrate my good fortune? I'm not doing anything to you, Jordan. I'm just giving you the opportunity to experience small-town hospitality." He looked around the room, finally understanding that he was surrounded by people who knew exactly who he was and what he'd been planning. The friendly faces weren't so friendly anymore. The conversations had quieted, and dozens of eyes were watching him with expressions that ranged from amused to hostile. "This is harassment," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "This is community," I corrected. "This is what happens when you try to hurt people who matter to other people. You wanted to network? Congratulations. You've just networked yourself right into the local legend." Jordan looked around one more time, then bolted for the exit. The crowd parted to let him through, and I could hear laughter and applause as he disappeared into the night. "Think he'll be back?" Jax asked. "I doubt it." I raised my beer in a toast. Here's to dodged bullets. The party was in full swing when Vanessa finally showed up at 10:30, dressed to impress in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's car payments. She lingered in the doorway, scanning the crowd, the decorations, and the general vibe of celebration that had nothing to do with her. I watched her scan the room, looking for Jordan, looking for Maya and Savannah, looking for any sign of the networking event she'd been expecting. Instead, she found a room full of people she'd dismissed as unworthy, all having the time of their lives at a party that was explicitly celebrating her absence. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and I raised my beer in a mock toast. Her expression went from confusion to understanding to pure rage in about 3 seconds. She started pushing through the crowd toward me, and I could see the storm building in her face. This was going to be fun. Vanessa cut through the crowd like a shark through chum, her red dress blazing under the ballroom lights. Conversations stopped as she passed, and I could feel the collective attention of the room shifting toward what everyone knew was about to be the main event. "What the hell is this?" she demanded when she reached me, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry to the nearby tables. "It's a party," I said mildly. "You know, music, food, drinks, people having fun? I thought you'd be familiar with the concept." "This isn't the party we planned." "You're absolutely right. This is much better." I gestured around the room. "Look at everyone having such a good time. Real people, real conversations, real relationships, no networking required." Her eyes were scanning the crowd frantically. "Where's Jordan? Where are Maya and Savannah?" "Jordan left early. Something about car trouble." I took a sip of my beer. "Maya and Savannah are around somewhere. Last I saw, they were having a very educational conversation with Coach Miller about community values." "You son of a bastard." Her voice was getting louder, drawing more attention. You did this on purpose. Did what? Threw a party for my friends, celebrated my good fortune, used my own money to rent a venue and provide food and drinks for people I care about? I shrugged. Guilty as charged. You know what I mean? Actually, I'm not sure I do. Why don't you explain it to everyone? I raised my voice slightly, and the conversations around us died completely. Tell them about your business meeting with Jordan. Tell them about your networking opportunities. Tell them about Operation Upgrade. You went through my phone. You dropped your phone in my garage. I returned it to you. I pulled out the burner and held it up. This phone, on the other hand, you left in my house. Community property, you might say. You can't what? Can't read messages on a device that was abandoned in my own home? Can't share information about plans that directly affect my life? I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. Folks, I want to tell you all something. 3 days ago, my fiancée here canceled our engagement party because she said the guest list wasn't good enough. She said you weren't successful enough, weren't aspirational enough, didn't fit the brand she wanted to project. A murmur went through the crowd. These were people who'd known me for years, who'd supported my business, who'd been there through good times and bad. They were teachers and mechanics and shop owners and retirees, the backbone of the community that Vanessa had dismissed as worthless. But that's not the interesting part, I continued. The interesting part is what she was really planning for tonight. Don't, Vanessa said, her voice tight with panic. She was planning to use this party, our engagement party, as her coming out event, her debut as someone too good for the man who supported her for 3 years while she built her lifestyle brand. I could hear the anger creeping into my voice, but I didn't try to stop it. She was going to publicly humiliate me in front of everyone we know, then move on to bigger and better things with her new business partner. That's not true, Vanessa said, but her voice was weak. Isn't it? I held up the phone. Should I read some of these messages? Share some of these photos? Show everyone the detailed timeline you and your friends put together? You wouldn't. Try me. The standoff lasted about 10 seconds before Vanessa's nerve broke. She lunged for the phone, and I pulled it back just out of reach. She stumbled slightly in her heels, and Jax appeared beside her to steady her with one massive hand. Careful there, he said gently. Don't want you to hurt yourself. Get your hands off me, she snapped, just trying to help. Jax's voice was mild, but his grip was firm. Wouldn't want you to fall and cause a scene. I'm already causing a scene, she said bitterly. No, I said. You caused a scene 3 days ago when you decided our relationship wasn't Instagram-worthy enough. Tonight, you're just dealing with the consequences. Mrs. Hanley appeared at my other elbow, moving through the crowd with the authority of someone who'd been managing social situations since before most of these people were born. Vanessa, dear, she said sweetly, perhaps you'd like to sit down? You look a bit flustered. I don't need to sit down. I need to talk to my fiancé privately. Oh, but this is so much more entertaining, Mrs. Hanley said. Besides, privacy is overrated. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, as they say. I could see Vanessa calculating her options and finding them all bad. She was surrounded by people who'd heard enough to understand what was happening, trapped in a public space with no graceful exit strategy. Every move she made was being watched, evaluated, and undoubtedly recorded by multiple phones. Fine, she said finally. You want to do this here? Let's do it here. She turned to address the crowd, her voice rising. You want to know the truth? The truth is that I outgrew this place. I outgrew him. I found better opportunities with better people, and I was trying to make a clean break. A clean break, I repeated. Is that what you call it? I call it being honest about what I want out of life. I want more than this. She gestured around the room dismissively. More than small-town gossip and small-town people and small-town dreams. I want to build something that matters. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. I could see faces in the audience. People who'd known Vanessa for years, who'd watched her grow up, who'd supported her when she was struggling to get her social media business off the ground. They were hearing her dismiss not just me, but all of them, everything they'd built together. "And Jordan was going to help you build something that matters?" I asked. Jordan understands ambition. He understands that sometimes you have to make hard choices to get where you want to go. Hard choices like lying to your fiancé for 6 months while you plan your exit strategy. I wasn't lying. I was protecting you from information you couldn't handle. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. Even now, caught red-handed with evidence of her betrayal, she was trying to spin it as something she'd done for my benefit. "Protecting me," I said slowly. "By photographing my bank statements and sharing them with your friends so they could help you maximize your settlement potential?" A gasp went through the crowd. That detail hadn't been public knowledge, and hearing it laid out so starkly made the calculation behind her actions impossible to ignore. "That's taken out of context," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "What context makes that okay?" The question came from somewhere in the crowd. I couldn't see who'd asked it, but it was picked up and repeated by other voices. "What context? How do you take that out of context? What kind of person does that?" Vanessa looked around the room, finally understanding that she'd lost the crowd completely. These weren't her Instagram followers who only saw carefully curated posts. These were real people who'd just watched her reveal exactly who she was under the filter. "You're all pathetic," she said finally. "Sitting here in your little bubble, congratulating yourselves on your little lives, never dreaming of anything bigger. I was trying to rise above this, and you want to drag me back down." "Nobody's dragging you anywhere," I said. "You're free to leave anytime you want. In fact, I encourage it." "Fine, I will." She turned toward the exit, then stopped and looked back. "But don't think this is over. I know things about you too, Eli. About your business, about your taxes, about what?" Coach Miller's voice cut through her threat like a blade. He'd appeared behind her, still wearing his friendly smile, but with something much harder in his eyes. "What exactly do you know about Eli's business?" Vanessa looked at the cop and seemed to realize she'd just threatened someone in front of a room full of witnesses, including law enforcement. "Nothing," she said quickly. "I don't know anything." "Good," Coach Miller said, "because making false accusations about someone's business practices or tax situation could be considered harassment or defamation, depending on the specifics. I wasn't making accusations. I was just what?" His voice was still friendly, but there was steel underneath it. "Just threatening your ex-fiancé in public? Just implying you have damaging information about his legal business activities? Just trying to intimidate someone who's done nothing but throw a party?" Vanessa looked around the room one more time, seeing nothing but hostile faces and phone cameras. Her grand exit was turning into a public humiliation, and she was smart enough to recognize when she was beaten. "I'm leaving," she said. "Good choice," I said. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." She made it halfway to the exit before Maya intercepted her. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language was tense and angry. Savannah joined them, and the three women huddled near the door in what looked like an increasingly heated discussion. "Think they're planning their next move?" Jax asked. "I think they're realizing they don't have a next move," I said. "Maya and Savannah just watched their meal ticket self-destruct in public. They're probably trying to figure out how to distance themselves from the wreckage." As if to prove my point, Maya suddenly stepped back from the group, shaking her head vigorously. Savannah followed suit, and I could see them both pulling out their phones. Within seconds, they were typing furiously, probably crafting social media posts to establish that they'd never really been that close to Vanessa anyway. Vanessa stood alone by the door for a moment, looking lost and confused. The confident woman who'd walked in an hour ago was gone, replaced by someone who was finally understanding the difference between online popularity and real-world consequences. She left without another word, and the room erupted in applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, raising my beer high, "I'd like to propose a toast to bullets dodged, lessons learned, and the importance of knowing who your real friends are." The response was thunderous. Glasses clinked, people cheered, and the party resumed with even more energy than before. I'd just provided them with enough gossip to last until Christmas, and they were loving every minute of it. But as I watched the crowd celebrate, I realized this was only the beginning. Vanessa might be gone, but she wasn't defeated. People like her didn't just disappear when their first plan failed. They regrouped, they adapted, and they came back with something worse. I was going to need to be ready for round 2. The hangover hit me like a freight train Sunday morning, but it was worth every throb behind my eyes. The party had gone until nearly 2 a.m., with people lingering to rehash every moment of Vanessa's public meltdown. Mrs. Hanley had been the last to leave, pressing a container of leftover lasagna into my hands and promising that the whole town would know the truth by noon tomorrow. She wasn't wrong. By the time I dragged myself to the diner for coffee and breakfast, the story had already grown in the telling. According to the waitress, Vanessa had tried to steal my life savings. According to the cook, she'd been running a prostitution ring through Instagram. According to the guy at the counter, she'd been plotting to burn down my shop for the insurance money. None of that's true, I told Jax when he showed up looking surprisingly fresh for someone who'd matched me, drink for drink. "Course not," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "But it's more entertaining than the real story. Give it a week and she'll be an international spy who was using you to infiltrate the classic car restoration underground." "There's a classic car restoration underground?" "There is now." He grinned and stole a piece of bacon from my plate. "You see the social media explosion yet?" I hadn't. I'd turned my phone off after the third congratulatory text and hadn't turned it back on. But Jax showed me his screen, scrolling through Facebook posts, Instagram stories, and Twitter threads that had captured various moments from the night before. The hashtag #dodged a bullet was trending locally, with photos and videos of the party, quotes from Vanessa's meltdown, and increasingly creative memes about lifestyle brands and networking opportunities. Someone had already created a fake Instagram account for Jordan Pierce, lifestyle influencer, that was nothing but pictures of flat tires and soapy car windows. "This is getting out of hand," I said. "This is just getting started," Jax corrected. "Maya posted a 3-paragraph apology on Instagram this morning, claiming she was manipulated by toxic people and deeply regrets any harm caused to innocent parties." Savannah went even further. She's claiming she was secretly feeding you information the whole time because she couldn't stand to see a good man being used. That's not true. Doesn't matter. Truth is whatever people want to believe, and right now they want to believe you're the hero and Vanessa's the villain. He scrolled through more posts. "Look at this. Someone started a GoFundMe to help you rebuild your life after emotional abuse. It's already raised $3,000. I stared at the screen. "I don't want their money." "Then donate it to charity, but don't think you can stop this train now. You lit the fuse last night, and now everyone wants to watch the fireworks." He was right, and part of me was starting to feel uncomfortable with how quickly the narrative had spiraled beyond my control. I'd wanted to expose Vanessa's betrayal and humiliate her the way she'd planned to humiliate me. Mission accomplished. But this was becoming something bigger and uglier, and I wasn't sure I liked where it was heading. My phone started buzzing as soon as I turned it on. Texts, calls, voicemails, and notifications flooded in like a digital avalanche. Most were supportive, but some were from numbers I didn't recognize, reporters from local news stations, bloggers who'd caught wind of the story, and what appeared to be several podcast hosts who wanted to interview me about toxic relationships in the social media age. One text stood out from the rest. It was from Vanessa. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." I showed it to Jax, who snorted. Now she wants to talk. Where was this reasonableness when she was planning Operation Upgrade? Maybe I should hear her out. Maybe you should remember that she's had 12 hours to regroup and plan her counterattack. Jax's expression was serious now. People like Vanessa don't just roll over and accept defeat. They adapt, they pivot, they find new angles. Whatever she wants to talk about, it's not going to be an apology. He was right, but I was curious enough to text back, "Fine, one conversation, public place, 1 hour." Her response was immediate. "Coffee shop on Main Street, 2 p.m. I spent the rest of the morning at my shop, trying to focus on work but finding myself constantly distracted by the steady stream of people stopping by to congratulate me, share gossip, or just gawk at the local celebrity. By noon, I'd had enough and decided to close early. The coffee shop was crowded when I arrived, which was exactly what I'd wanted. Whatever Vanessa had planned, she'd have to do it in front of witnesses. I grabbed a table near the center of the room and waited. She walked in at exactly 2 o'clock, and I barely recognized her. Gone was the Instagram-perfect appearance, replaced by someone who looked like she'd been crying for hours. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, she wore jeans and a plain sweater, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup. It was a calculated look, vulnerable, authentic, sympathetic. But I knew her well enough to recognize the performance. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. Her voice was soft, humble, completely different from the imperious tone she'd used the night before. "You said this had gone too far." "I'm listening." "I deserve everything that happened last night," she began, and I almost laughed at how perfectly she'd pitched it, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, but not so loud as to seem like she was performing. "I made terrible choices. I hurt someone I cared about, and I got exactly what I had coming to me." "Okay," I said cautiously, "but this isn't just about me anymore." She leaned forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Do you know what's been happening to me since last night? The messages I've been getting? The threats?" I hadn't expected this angle. "What threats?" "People have been calling me a whore, a gold digger, a sociopath. Someone found my address and posted it online with a suggestion that I needed to be taught a lesson. 3 different people have called my parents to tell them what a terrible daughter they raised." Her voice cracked slightly. "I lost 2 clients this morning because they saw the videos and decided they didn't want to be associated with me." The people at the surrounding tables were listening now, and I could see the mood in the room shifting. The woman who'd been a villain 12 hours ago was transforming into a victim before my eyes. "I'm sorry that's happening," I said carefully, "but I didn't tell anyone to threaten you or contact your family." "You didn't have to. You lit the match and threw it into a room full of gasoline." She wiped her eyes with a tissue that appeared to be genuinely damp. "I know I hurt you, Eli. I know I made mistakes. But did I really deserve to have my entire life destroyed?" It was masterfully done. She wasn't denying what she'd done, wasn't trying to justify it, wasn't even asking for forgiveness. She was simply pointing out that the punishment might not fit the crime and letting the audience draw their own conclusions about whether I'd gone too far. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want you to help me stop this before it gets worse." She reached across the table and touched my hand, a gesture that was both intimate and perfectly visible to everyone watching. "We both know this town. We know how these things work. Right now, you're the hero, and I'm the villain, and everyone's picking sides. But sooner or later, people are going to start feeling sorry for me and wondering if you're really as innocent as you seem." There it was. The threat wrapped in vulnerability, the warning disguised as a plea for help. She was telling me that the narrative could shift, that public opinion was fickle, and that I'd better be careful not to overplay my hand. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A joint statement. We both made mistakes. We both learned from them, and we're both moving on with our lives. We ask people to respect our privacy and stop the harassment. She squeezed my hand gently. We end this before it destroys both of us. I looked around the coffee shop, seeing the faces watching our conversation with rapt attention. Some looked sympathetic to Vanessa, others seemed suspicious of her sudden transformation. But all of them were invested in the story now, and I realized she was right about one thing. This had taken on a life of its own. And if I don't agree to your joint statement? Her expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. Then, I guess we'll see what happens when people start learning more about your side of the story. My side of the story? Everyone's been so focused on what I did wrong that they haven't asked many questions about you. Her voice was still soft, still vulnerable, but there was steel underneath it now. Like why you had access to my private phone. Like whether going through someone's personal messages without permission might be illegal. Like whether publicly humiliating someone and encouraging harassment might have legal consequences. The threat was clearer now, though still wrapped in enough ambiguity to maintain plausible deniability. She was suggesting that my actions might not have been as legally bulletproof as I'd assumed, and that she had lawyers who might be willing to test that theory. You're threatening to sue me? I'm suggesting that we both have things we'd rather not see dragged through the legal system. She smiled sadly, and I had to admire the performance. I don't want to hurt you, Eli. I just want this to stop before it ruins both our lives. I sat back in my chair, studying her face and trying to calculate the angles. She was good, better than I'd given her credit for. The helpless victim act was perfectly calibrated to generate sympathy while delivering threats that couldn't be easily proven. If I rejected her offer, she'd probably leave the coffee shop in tears, and half the town would be convinced I was a heartless bully by dinner time. But there was something she hadn't considered. You know what, Vanessa? You're absolutely right. I stood up, pulling out my wallet. This has gone too far, and we should definitely make a joint statement. Relief flooded her face. Really? Really? In fact, let's do it right now. I raised my voice slightly, addressing the coffee shop. Folks, I know you've all been following our little drama, and Vanessa and I want to set the record straight. She looked confused but pleased, probably thinking she'd successfully manipulated me into backing down. Vanessa's right that some people have taken this too far, I continued. Nobody should be threatening her or harassing her family. That's not what this is about. Nods around the room. So far, so good from her perspective. But I also want to be clear about something. I pulled out her burner phone, which I'd been carrying since the party. Everything I shared last night was true. The messages, the photos, the planning, all of it happened exactly the way I described. Her face went pale as she realized where this was heading. And since Vanessa's concerned about legal issues, I want everyone to know that this phone was abandoned in my house, making it legally accessible to me. I also want you to know that I've made copies of everything, which I've given to my lawyer for safekeeping. Eli, she started, but I wasn't finished. So, yes, let's all move on. Let's stop the harassment and the threats and the social media pile-on. I looked directly at her. But let's also not pretend that exposing someone's betrayal is the same thing as betraying someone. There's a difference between being a victim of harassment and being a victim of consequences. I left money for my coffee and walked toward the door, pausing just long enough to add, "Oh, and Vanessa? If you do decide to pursue legal action, you might want to ask your lawyer about something called discovery. It's a process where both sides have to share all their relevant documents and communications, all of them." The look on her face told me she understood exactly what that meant. If she sued me, she'd have to turn over every device, every account, every message she'd ever sent. And I was willing to bet there were things in her digital history that would make Operation Upgrade look like amateur hour. I walked out of the coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in days. Round 2 was over, and I was still standing, but I had a feeling round 3 was going to be the real test. 2 weeks passed in relative quiet. The social media storm gradually died down, replaced by newer scandals and fresher gossip. Vanessa seemed to have taken my advice about legal action. No lawyers contacted me, no papers were served, no threats materialized. She'd simply disappeared from town as completely as if she'd never existed. Maya and Savannah had reinvented themselves as advocates for authentic relationships, and were building their own social media followings by sharing vague posts about toxic people and lessons learned. Jordan had apparently returned to the city, where his lifestyle brand was now focused on overcoming small-town narrow-mindedness and rising above haters. I should have been relieved. I should have been celebrating my victory and moving on with my life. Instead, I felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The feeling proved justified on a Thursday afternoon when Coach Miller stopped by my shop. "Eli," he said, accepting the beer I offered him. "We need to talk." "That sounds ominous." "Maybe, maybe not." He took a long sip and studied me with the expression he'd perfected during 30 years of dealing with teenage drama. "You been keeping up with Vanessa's activities since she left town?" "I thought she disappeared completely." "She did, from here, but she's been busy elsewhere." He pulled out his phone and showed me a website. "Recognize this?" It was a professional-looking blog called Surviving Narcissistic Abuse, with Vanessa's photo prominently displayed. The tagline read, "One woman's journey from victim to survivor." I scrolled through the posts, feeling my stomach drop with each headline. How I escaped my abusive relationship. The warning signs I ignored. Why victims stay silent. Rebuilding your life after emotional terrorism. She's claiming you were abusive? Not directly, she's too smart for that. Coach Miller pointed to specific passages. See how she words it? My former partner, and someone I trusted, and the person who claimed to love me. She never mentions your name, never makes specific accusations, but anyone who knows the story can connect the dots. I kept reading, and the picture she painted was masterful in its inversion of reality. According to her blog, she'd been trapped in a relationship with a controlling, manipulative man who monitored her communications, isolated her from friends, and used public humiliation as a weapon. The party wasn't revenge for her betrayal. It was the culmination of years of psychological abuse designed to destroy her self-esteem and social connections. This is insane, I said. She's describing herself. Projection's a hell of a thing, Coach Miller agreed. But here's the problem. It's working. She's got 12,000 followers now, and the story's starting to get picked up by bigger platforms. There's a podcast that wants to interview her, and some online magazine is thinking about doing a feature story. About what? She's not using my name. Not yet, but she's dropping enough hints that people are starting to figure it out. He showed me the comments section, where readers were praising her courage and sharing their own stories of abuse. Several had already connected her to the small-town revenge party story that had made minor waves on social media 2 weeks earlier. So, what do I do? That depends. How much do you trust your version of the truth? It was a good question. I'd been so focused on exposing Vanessa's betrayal that I hadn't considered how the story might look from the outside. A man who'd gone through his partner's phone, publicly humiliated her, and orchestrated a campaign of social media harassment. When you stripped away the context and motivation, my actions could definitely be painted as abusive. I trust the truth, I said finally, but I'm not sure the truth matters if she gets to tell her version first and louder. Then maybe it's time to tell your version, properly this time. That evening, I sat in my garage with a laptop and a beer, trying to figure out how to respond to Vanessa's blog without looking defensive or vindictive. Every draft I wrote sounded either whiny or aggressive, and I was starting to understand why she'd gotten ahead of the narrative so effectively. My phone rang around 9 o'clock. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer it anyway. "Is this Eli Carver?" The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. "Depends who's asking." "My name is Rebecca Santos. I'm a journalist with the Tribune, and I'm working on a story about online harassment and social media vigilantism. I was hoping you might be willing to comment." "What kind of story?" "Well, I've been following the blog posts by someone who appears to be your former partner, and I'm trying to get a complete picture of what happened. She's agreed to an interview, but she suggested I should also speak with you to get your side of the story." Of course she had. Vanessa was too smart to tell her story without appearing to give me a chance to respond. It made her look fair and reasonable while putting me in an impossible position. If I refused to comment, it would look like I had something to hide. If I did comment, anything I said could be twisted to support her narrative. "When do you need this finished by?" I asked. "Tomorrow evening. I know it's short notice, but I'll call you back." I hung up and immediately called Jax, who arrived 20 minutes later with reinforcements in the form of Mrs. Hanley and Coach Miller. We sat around my kitchen table like a war council, trying to figure out the best way to handle what was clearly Vanessa's final gambit. "She's forcing your hand," Mrs. Hanley said after I'd explained the situation. "Either you respond and risk looking defensive, or you don't respond and let her control the narrative completely." "What if I just told the truth?" I asked. "Laid out exactly what happened, showed the evidence, let people judge for themselves." "The evidence you obtained by going through her phone without permission?" Coach Miller shook his head. "That's not going to play well with a general audience, especially not when she's already framed you as controlling and invasive. So I'm screwed either way." "Not necessarily," Jax said slowly. "What if you didn't respond to her story at all?" "But you just said—" "I said you shouldn't respond to her story. I didn't say you shouldn't tell your own story." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "She's betting that you'll either stay silent or get defensive. But what if you did something completely different?" "Like what?" "Like throw another party." The idea was so unexpected that I actually laughed. "A party? How is that going to help?" "Think about it," Mrs. Hanley said, her eyes lighting up with understanding. "She's trying to rewrite history, to make people forget what actually happened, but you've got something she doesn't have, witnesses, lots of them." "A reunion," Coach Miller said, nodding. "Get everyone who was at the original party together again. Let them tell their stories, share their photos and videos, remind people what they actually saw with their own eyes. And invite the reporter," Jax added. "Let her see for herself what kind of person you really are, what kind of community this is. Show her the difference between online narratives and real-world relationships." It was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of getting dragged into a he said she said battle with Vanessa, I'd let the community speak for itself. Instead of defending my actions, I'd let people see the results. A town full of people who knew me, trusted me, and were willing to stand up for me. "One problem," I said. "What if nobody comes?" Mrs. Hanley snorted. "Honey, this is the most exciting thing that's happened in this town since the mayor got caught embezzling from the library fund. People will come just to be part of the story." She was right. By Friday evening, the hotel ballroom was packed again, but this time the energy was different. Instead of celebration, there was a sense of purpose, of community solidarity. People had brought their phones and tablets, ready to show photos and videos from the original party. Several had prepared statements about what they'd witnessed that night. Rebecca Santos arrived at 7 o'clock, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I could see her scanning the crowd with professional skepticism, probably expecting to find a bunch of small-town yokels who'd been manipulated by a charismatic sociopath. "Ms. Santos," I said, approaching her with a beer and a smile. "Thanks for coming. I thought you might want to hear from some other people who were here that night. I appreciate the invitation, she said carefully. Though I have to say, this is an unusual way to handle a media interview. This is an unusual situation. I gestured around the room. These are the people Vanessa dismissed as not worth her time. I thought you might want to meet them for yourself. What followed was 2 hours of the most effective character testimony I could have imagined. Mrs. Hanley walked the reporter through the timeline of events, showing screenshots and photos that documented Vanessa's behavior. Coach Miller explained the legal issues around abandoned property and public disclosure. Jax shared videos from the original party that showed clearly how Vanessa had behaved and what she'd said, but the most powerful moments came from people I hadn't expected. The waitress from the diner talked about how Vanessa had treated service workers. A former client shared emails that showed her pattern of manipulation and broken promises. Even Maya showed up, apparently having decided that her best chance of avoiding guilt by association was to distance herself from Vanessa as publicly as possible. I want to be clear about something, Maya told the reporter. I was part of what Vanessa called Operation Upgrade, and I'm not proud of it. But I want people to understand what that actually meant. It wasn't just about leaving Eli. It was about destroying him. She wanted to take his money, ruin his reputation, and leave him with nothing. What happened at that party wasn't abuse. It was justice. By the end of the evening, Rebecca Santos looked like a different person. The skeptical journalist had been replaced by someone who was clearly struggling to reconcile Vanessa's blog posts with the evidence she'd seen and the people she'd met. "This is quite a community you have here," she said as the crowd began to thin out. "It's not perfect," I said, "but it's real. These are real people with real relationships built on real experiences, not curated social media posts or lifestyle branding. And you're not concerned about how this might look? Organizing what could be seen as a campaign against your former partner?" "I'm not campaigning against anyone. I'm just letting people tell the truth about what they witnessed." I handed her a flash drive. "Everything's on there. The original messages, the photos, the timeline, the witness statements. You can verify all of it independently." She took the drive and studied my face. "Why are you doing this? You could have just ignored her blog, let the story die." "Because she's not just lying about me. She's lying about all of them." I looked around the room at the people who'd stood up for me, who'd shared their stories and their evidence because they believed in the truth. These people matter. Their experiences matter. And I won't let anyone dismiss them as irrelevant just because they don't have enough followers or the right kind of lifestyle brand. The Tribune story ran the following Tuesday with the headline, "The Other Side of the Story. When Social Media Narratives Meet Small-Town Reality." It was fair, balanced, and devastating to Vanessa's credibility. Rebecca Santos had done her homework, fact-checking every claim and interviewing dozens of sources. The picture that emerged was of a community that had been genuinely shocked by betrayal and had responded with the kind of social accountability that used to be normal before everyone retreated behind screens. More importantly, the story included details that Vanessa hadn't expected anyone to verify. Her business partner, Jordan, turned out to have a history of targeting women in relationships, promising them opportunities that never materialized while using them for money and connections. The Operation Upgrade group chat revealed planning that went far beyond simple infidelity into what could reasonably be called fraud. Within hours of the story's publication, Vanessa's blog vanished. Her social media accounts were deactivated. The podcast interview was called off, and the magazine feature was quietly scrapped. She'd overplayed her hand, and this time, there was no coming back from it. I was closing up the shop the following Friday when I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 2 words written in Vanessa's handwriting. "You win." I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. Then I locked up and walked home through the quiet streets of my small town, where people knew each other's real names and real stories, where actions had consequences, and where the truth still mattered more than the narrative. It had been a hell of a month, but I'd learned something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's just refusing to let someone else write your story. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, you get to live in a place where other people are willing to help you write a better ending.